Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond. The Web Platform Podcast is a proud O'Reilly media partner. As such, one of the benefits we provide our listeners, that's you, are special discounts such as 50% off of ebooks and 40% off of printed materials. So this includes but is not limited to books on web technologies, as well as other technologies you may be using. So your discount code is all caps PCBW. That's PCBW, all in caps. So head over to O'Reilly.com, that's OREILLY.com, right now to get all your favorite tech books at much lower prices.
This is the Web Platform Podcast, episode number 72. We're going to be talking about teaching and learning Angular. I'm your host this time around, Danny Blue. And with me, we have, as always, Justin Ribeiro.
Hello, wonderful people.
Pascal Precht.
Hello.
And Christoph, which I will not try the last name. We just went over this, but I'm not even going to try.
Bergdorf.
Exactly, yeah. Bergdorf.
Castle Village, was it? Chris Castle Village.
Yeah, it translates perfectly into Castle Village.
Okay. And so for our guest this week, we have Kent Dodds.
That's Kent D. Dodds. Hey there.
and Shai Reznik.
Good. You pronounce it correctly. Yeah,
excellent.
Nice.
Look, all that practice it's for something. It's not completely useless. But but yeah. So real quick, everybody, just starting at we've had Pascal on before, but so just starting with you, just give us a quick introduction. Tell us who you are, what you do, what you like.
Right. So yeah, my name is Pascal. I'm a software engineer and trainer at ThoughtRam, and I do Angular and Git trainings. And I've done the last couple of years Angular stuff in the open source world, and yeah, nowadays I'm teaching it to others with Christoph.
So let me just follow up. So I'm the colleague of Pascal. I'm Christoph. And yeah, we founded a company together last year to teach people Angular and also Git, the versioning control system. I've been a developer for most of my life, and I'm also a language nerd. I love languages like Rust and all other leading edge stuff. And yeah, love open source, contribute a lot, and yeah, that's me.
Kent, you want to go next?
Sure. So my name is Kent C. Dodds. I am a JavaScript developer at a company called Allianza. We do voice over IP. I'm actually leaving them soon to go work for PayPal. And so wow. Exciting times. I'm pretty stoked about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I've been doing Angular since the pre-1.0 days, and got on the train with Egghead.io, and so I do training on Egghead.io. I have about 65 lessons, most of them Angular, and I like to speak at meetups and conferences. I created Angular Air, so if people are interested in another podcast that's more centered on Angular Air, check that out. And that's pretty much my Angular stuff. Oh, and I also maintain Angular formally. I'm looking for maintainers right now, actually. So if you're interested, ping me. So that's me.
Nice. And last up, Shai.
Yeah, this is me. I'm Shai Reznik. I'm the founder of HighRes.io, which is for like a behind-the-scene preview. It's going to launch in the 1st of January, so in 1 month, finally. So it's an online training school. We teaches Angular and front-end development, but in a weird way, in a more like crazier way. So I've been doing Angular since I think 2012. I moved from a lot of framework. I come from Flash and Flex background, and I do consulting, and I founded the JavaScript Israel group. I'm from Israel, so it makes sense. And it's currently the largest JavaScript meetup group in Israel, and so I do lectures and stuff like that. And we have a lot of good lecturers here in Israel. And I do improv in my spare time, so I do crazy stuff on stage. Yeah,
awesome.
So yeah, I have a group called Shirley and the Cans. This is our name. We are 3 fat high-tech guys, developers who does every couple of months we do a show for the high-tech community in Israel, and we do like a sprint, kickoff meeting in front of the audience, and they give us ideas we ask questions and stuff, and these are the names for the sketches we improvise on stage. So we based on our day-to-day high-tech lives. So it's pretty funny.
You do improv. You say you do improv on the side, but I think you do improv all the time and on podcasts as well.
Why do you say that?
Because you're just hilarious. I was giving you a compliment.
Oh, okay. I thought you were insulting me. Yeah, I can't refer him probably to the last episode or one before the last episode of Angular Air, which me and Jeff trolled everyone there, which was
it was an experience. I recommend you go look at it.
Probably one of the best episodes.
See, I haven't listened to it. I haven't listened to it yet. It's sitting in my queue, so now I have to go.
You don't need to listen. You need to see it on YouTube.
Right, you watch it.
Okay.
It's actually it's a video cast. It's not just a podcast. It's a video cast.
All right. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. All right. So first question that we have to throw it out there. Angular's been around for a long time. We can probably assume that most people know what it is, but who wants to jump in and give us the quick 5-minute pitch on what? Not 5 minutes, please, not 5 minutes. A very quick pitch on what Angular is.
It's a framework.
It's a super-heroic framework.
Moving on.
Yeah.
I could say that Angular, I think on the homepage, if I remember correctly, it says that it's HTML enhanced for web apps. So Angular allows you to be declarative in your markup, where like in jQuery days, you'd have to go and select the DOM element that you wanted and manipulate it imperatively. Whereas Angular allows you to isolate all the logic of DOM manipulation and your DOM interaction to these things called directives, and then you use those directives in your templates in your HTML, and that just makes it really a lot easier to understand the interactions inside of your template.
I like to explain to beginning developers that after I explain JavaScript, I just tell them that Angular makes you write much less code in JavaScript and in a much more orderly way, so you can maintain it better later if you want to add stuff or remove stuff. That's basically it.
So you basically first try to scare them, showing them all the ugly parts of JavaScript, and then Angular comes in and is like the cool 8.
Yeah, save the world. Yeah, exactly.
Finally, everything makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It is
I just want to say it also matches with another tagline of the framework, which is that Angular is a superheroic JavaScript framework. So it's all about superheroes and saving the world.
Yeah, so because it's been around for a long time. Ken, I think you said you were around before the 1.0 days for some of that stuff, and I'm sure some of you others have been there as well. So when is it? So all right, I'm say I have a little bit of experience, right? So I'm coming into something and I have to pick a framework, and I'm looking at evaluating Angular. When is Angular a good choice, and when is it a bad choice? I'm sorry, just holding up. Everybody's making it very difficult. And see, nobody on audio is going to understand what's going on, but it's making everything really difficult for me. I'm doing my best, I promise. but
you should edit. You difficult job.
That's too much work. Just put it in there.
Sorry, I'll bring us back on track with that question. So, Angular is a good choice when you and your team feel like that's what you want to use. I think I had this epiphany yesterday that like, just like how I can't describe to you the color red, like it just, I perceive it in one way and maybe you perceive it differently, but there's no way for us to really prove it. But if somehow we found out like red to me looked green as green does to you, and we are like arguing about, no, it looks like this, and you say, no, it looks like this, it really actually doesn't matter. We can still accomplish our job, in painting a canvas or whatever. But like what it really comes down to is how our brain thinks about it. And so if you and your team think about developing web applications in the way that Angular helps you do that, then Angular is a terrific fit for you and your team. And so I think it really just kind of comes down to like investigate the different options that there are out there, and choose the one that best suits you and your team, and the way that you think about things.
So I would say that you have you have a lot of solutions out there, and some of them I think became more popular because they solved the problem maybe in a quicker way or more understandable way, or something like makes it easier to solve the problem, which the problem, by problem I mean developing web applications, which is a huge problem.
That's actually a good point. I think like one of the biggest selling points of the Angular framework has always been that if you compare like the code of an Angular solution to the code of the same solution with a different framework, then the lines of code, the code size of the Angular was always quite terse. So it really helps you to solve problems in a quite efficient way, I think. And like technically, I think like most like web things can actually benefit from Angular. I mean, like we've been running workshops at big car makers which want to use Angular for the multimedia system in a car. Yeah, so it's really, I mean, web technology is just like going everywhere. So it really has a broad focus. I think you would probably not want to use it if you really only need a static website. Yeah, then there's just not much benefit that you can gain. Yeah, but beside that, I think like you have plenty of use cases where it's a perfect, acceptable solution to use Angular.
To go on top of what you're saying, Christoph, the like having a static website, yeah, that's not a super good use case. We did that with Angular Air, and it sort of works because Google now is running your JavaScript, and that's how they're doing SEO. But Bing doesn't do that, and lots of other search engines do that. So you have issues with SEO for stuff like that. And so it's better to use maybe some other solution for just a simple static site. But if you're building a web application, Angular will solve your problem every time. I totally believe that. One thing that I would disagree with, though, is that less code is better. Less code is not always necessarily better. And so, like, just to kind of throw that out there, sometimes the more maintainable code actually requires more. And so that's just an opinion that I have, and I believe is true. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. So this is something to decide on case by case. Like sometimes it doesn't make sense to trim something down, like trim a function down to be super compact, and then nobody can actually understand what it does. But I mean, like if you just look at some very basic code, like you're typing in an input and you want to output this in a paragraph or something like that, yeah, then with Angular you don't need a single line of JavaScript for this. Yeah, you just put a ng model directive on the input, and you use this interpolation in the paragraph, and it's there. Yeah. So no single line of JavaScript whatsoever. So I think it is very it just leads naturally to very slim code.
I think the keyword is not maybe less line of code, or it's more easier. It's not doesn't necessarily have to be less lines of code, so your code should be clean and with clear names and stuff like that. But it makes it easier. If we zoom out for a second and look at the whole like ecosystem behind the framework, why should you choose one framework over the other? I think you have a lot of consideration to make. So and it comes down, I think, to so I agree that your team should evaluate what like they agree about in your day-to-day, because you need to develop stuff in that framework. But I think if you zoom out and you consider, okay, hiring more developers in the near future or in the future, or having a community back you up in case something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, right? And you need help from maybe the maintainers, or maybe the other people from the community. And these are also consideration to make when choosing, I think, when choosing a framework. I started with JavaScript. When I transitioned from Flex to JavaScript, I started with JavaScript MVC. If you know this framework, it's like, yeah, it's sort of like Backbone, but I don't know, something along those lines. And yeah, I tried to build stuff in that, and it was okay. And then I moved to Ember, which was pre 1.0, and it was keep evolving, and the testing story wasn't that quite like in the MVC parts, and stuff were like messy. And when I moved after those two to Angular, stuff became like, oh, now I get it. Okay, this part goes here and this part goes here, and everything made sense. So it's not, I think it's a question of how easy is it for you to understand it, to build stuff in it, to maintain them, and to get help from other people in the community, and how easy is to hire new people to your, I don't know, team and stuff like that. This is my opinion.
But I think that sometimes it is actually not that easy, especially for beginners, to start off with Angular, because you have all these, I mean, you gave that ng-wet talk at ngConf. So you basically pointed out all the bad parts of the framework, like over-engineered parts, like having like, I don't know, like 4 different APIs to create a service or whatever. So I think sometimes it is really, it's not super easy for beginners. I think you always really have to learn and understand how the framework works, like what it does, in order to actually build good and efficient apps. Like also when it comes to things like big data sets that you want to display on your UI, then a lot of people run into this, that they have like a slow application because they have tons of watchers and I don't know how many filters applied in their templates, just because they don't know what the framework does with it. And then, applications become slow, which you probably don't have with other frameworks. Maybe in React or whatever, you don't really run into this kind of problem. I don't know. I haven't done anything with React, and I can't really say in what kind of cases I wouldn't use Angular, because I'm totally into Angular and I could actually use it for anything, but I would surely run into some problems at some point too. So, and then you have to reconsider what's going on.
Yeah, so this is kind of bringing us right back around to our kind of the main theme. We're talking about teaching and learning Angular. So you guys all teach Angular. So you just talked about problems that people run into. You said all the different APIs for creating largely the same thing, for creating a service, and things people don't know about people don't immediately know about watchers and don't understand the digest loop. So when you guys are starting to teach somebody, say somebody brand new to, let's say you have some JavaScript experience, but you are learning Angular for the first time. Where should they start, and where do you guys start in teaching them?
Well, here's a personal plug. I would start on Egghead.io. There are some really, really terrific lessons. And the nice thing about Egghead.io is they're like, each lesson is 5 minutes or less, or maybe a little more. And it's about a very specific topic. And so like and Egghead has a series of lessons that you can go through when you're just getting started. And then you can kind of dive deeper into these different concepts. So that's if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, I want to learn Angular 1, where do I start?" I'll give you a link to the specific place where I'd point them to. But that's where I have them start.
I agree. Egghead is cool and really, really easy for beginners to get started quickly. I think that if I look at so I teach all sorts of types of developers, developers who come from a different language background, or developers who just start from scratch, like this year started to learn programming. And so I think that one thing that repeats itself a lot is that you got to have a real use case to try things on. You got to have a real project you're passionate about, or a real feature in your work to work on for the next release, in order to really learn stuff deeply or keep it in your head. Because if you just learn the theory of things, you forget it very quickly. And I had a bunch of times in the beginning when I started teaching this stuff, which I had to repeat myself on the same workshop every week, because people got 10%. Maybe it was my bad teaching, right? But I learned that if I give them a real use case to try the stuff they learn, and to give them time to play with stuff on their own, and to figure out that they don't know this and don't know this, and they have holes in their knowledge, and then I come and fill these gaps. It makes it much easier and quicker to learn. And it's not really related to Angular. It's every framework or language and stuff you need to learn. But I'm teaching Angular, so basically it worked on Angular pretty well. So that's one thing that I think of.
I mean, can you teach a framework without a solid basis in programming, a given programming language? I mean, we talk a lot about beginners, and learning programming languages is one thing. Teaching someone a framework is a completely different thing. I mean, what are some of the underpinnings that, as a developer who's going into a framework like Angular, that you should understand? I mean, because Angular is open source, but it's a very big box to grok and understand. I mean, where do people get hung up? What should they know going in?
I think you always need to learn language. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah. So but just to add to that, I would say that you can actually be very effective in learning or building small things with Angular without knowing any JavaScript or any programming language at all. It's you can build stuff mostly in just HTML. But I would never build an application without understanding the framework to a fundamental level. So yeah, you can totally build stuff, and actually Angular is kind of a welcoming kind of framework in that it's easy to kind of get started and get excited about developing applications, because just like Christoph said, you have your input field, and then you can type something in there and have it bound directly to somewhere else on the page, and you see it update live, and so it gets really exciting, oh my gosh, I'm actually building something cool. But yeah, you
it was
definitely
designed for designers, right?
right. Yeah, exactly. And I've seen designers actually use this, use it and like totally love it because it's just so easy, to build something, mock something out. But if you're going to go into Angular, trusting that you can do that, you're going to have a really hard time. So I would definitely really strongly recommend that the most important thing that you can spend your time on is learning JavaScript, because as cool as Angular is, and it really is cool, Angular 1 will not be around in 3 or 4 years as much as it is today. But JavaScript, it won't be around forever. It certainly will be around in the next 3 to 4 years. And so learn JavaScript, and then you'll become a better Angular developer, or you'll become a better whatever the next finagled thing is that comes out developer, just because you understand JavaScript. So that's I think the most important thing that you can do.
I think I totally agree on that one, because we had when we in a couple of our trainings we had attendees that haven't really done anything in JavaScript before, so like people from the Java background or whatever, and then they, you show them code, you show them some features of the framework, and then what we do in our workshops or in our trainings is that we do some theoretical sessions, and then we do some interactive sessions where we discuss things, and then we show some demos and these kind of things. And then there's always this part where all the attendees have to do like some exercises so that they can actually code it themselves, because that's how you learn. You have to build stuff. And sometimes it happened that, people without actual JavaScript background, like without knowing the actual, the language itself, they really struggled with actually writing correct code because they didn't know the syntax. So there was no way they could actually solve the exercise. And so in our trainings, at least, it's like a kind of requirement that you are familiar with a JavaScript language. Like you have to know how to write a function. You have to know what variables are. Or I mean, as a developer, you know what variables are, but you really have to know the syntax. You have to know how to write a function or a variable or whatever. So without that knowledge, it's quite hard to follow any kind of training or to learn any framework. It doesn't matter if it's Java, Angular, or Ember, or React, or whatever. You really need to learn the language. Yeah.
I would also like to add that I think Angular always had a strong focus on actually encouraging working with the bare underlying technology. Like, for instance, there's not much support for the model in Angular. You've always been building your model as plain old JavaScript services, and you're working with plain old HTML. So we don't have special templating. We use HTML as our templating. So. And with Angular 2, it goes like even more in that direction, that we are relying on the plain underlying technology. You gotta understand how attributes work. You gotta understand how properties work in plain HTML and all those DOM APIs. So there's no way you can get around without without learning the underlying fundamentals, I think.
So for my students or people I teach, whether in consulting or workshops or stuff like that, I see a difference between beginners and maybe more advanced developers who aren't familiar with JavaScript. So for beginners, I saw a lot of struggle in when I said to them, okay, need to learn JavaScript. So, and because the same question kept popping up, which is, okay, where do I start? What do I learn in Java? So JavaScript is a big topic, and where do I start with it? And again, it ties back to what I said before. The theory problem. If you learn more theory, you forget, without practice, you forget a lot of stuff, and you need to practice it. So for the advanced or more experienced developers who just migrating to JavaScript, I always suggest reading JavaScript, the definitive guide, which is a 700-page book, but it really gets you into or maybe you don't know JS, the book on GitHub, which is also awesome, and to learn it from the basics, from the bottom up, and then you can. Why? Because then you can debug stuff if stuff don't work, and you don't have to rely on the API of Angular or every other framework. Because in a perfect world, the API would be perfect, and we wouldn't need to know JavaScript, right? Because everything would work, but it never the case. So that's why we need to learn the underlying layer, which is JavaScript. And that's what I say also to beginners, but I suggest something else for beginners. I suggest, I tell them to start like maybe more of, like to look at it as an onion, like with like layers that you peel off. And if you're a beginner, if you don't have something to satisfy you quickly, okay, to see a result, to see something you've built, it gets tougher, okay, if you need to read like 700 pages before you can start build stuff. So I always tell them to start with a really simple use case, which like a contact form or like an eBay-like website or like one page of it, right? Just to display like a list of products, something fairly easy if you know development, but for someone who just starting out, it will be a hard task because he needs to learn all of those layers. So I tell them to start with JavaScript, learn to build it with the native DOM APIs, see how hard it is, okay? And then I tell them, oh, okay, build the same thing with Angular. And then they can maybe get a better sense of what Angular is and what is it solving. So this is what I divided between the levels of experience. And
is that also what you're doing in your trainings at HighRes? Like that you first give them like something to solve in native JavaScript and then you start getting into Angular, or is that like now like more a general thing that you say to people?
So in HighRes, depending, I have HighRes Consulting and HighRes IO. So in HighRes IO, I focus mainly in the start on people with prior experience to Angular. So like I teach migration, and I have a course about Angular 2, which will come up like in 2 months, and all those stuff. But in my consulting or workshops and stuff I do, other than the website, the videos, I teach for beginners. I tell them I give them like the assignments of here, build this in JavaScript, and then here, let's build it in Angular and see the difference, and then we can learn. And I teach them the best practices up front, and tell them why, like what is the reasoning behind those best practices, and why you shouldn't use the global, and why you all of those stuff. But it should be like small bits of like gratifying successes. Like HTML is perfect for this. What Kent said, I totally agree, because if you learn HTML, I have a friend who is an accountant, and I told him, I just showed him, write H1 and your name and see it on the screen. And he was like, whoa, I'm a developer, I'm a hacker now. So HTML
My daughter
is
does
the best.
Same thing.
Really? She's an accountant?
She's 3 years old.
Oh, so, okay. So
every time she comes downstairs in the morning and sees me working, she's like, I want to learn to type.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's
But
awesome.
I totally agree with you, Shai. That's totally, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, start with the HTML. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's all really, really good stuff. And we've also touched on a little bit different environments for learning. So we've talked about something like Egghead, which is, I don't know if you'd want to call it more personal, but it's a little bit more one-on-one because it's you yourself sitting at your computer watching a video, and then we're also talking about all the way up to teaching almost entire development teams how to do this stuff and how to work together. So from your all's perspective, when you're approaching something, how do you prepare, a lesson or a segment differently if you're doing something for a video or something a little bit more one-on-one versus something for a group?
So, well, I haven't done any videos or video tutorials yet, but I can at least share my experience with ThoughtRam when we do on-site trainings. Like either if it's a public workshop or an in-house training. So Christoph and I, we basically worked on material for the we call it the Angular Masterclass. It's like you can see it as an experience, like something that we worked out, and then you can basically pick different modules from that masterclass, and then you put your own workshop together, more or less. And then so this material is like mainly slides, and then a bunch of exercises plus solutions. And we can basically reuse that stuff for all of our trainings. So what we had to do is we basically put a lot of energy and a lot of time into creating that material, because it's not just picking a topic and then just make some bullet points on a slide deck and then show it to your attendees. You really have to think about the structure and the kind of the thread that you want to go through, so that it all makes sense, that you like all the topics that you want to cover, they have to be connected at some point, so that it makes sense to the attendee. Like, I don't know, for example, building an application throughout a workshop is something that is actually very effective, because people learn not only just the features of this specific framework and how to use it, but they get the sort of big picture, like how an entire application actually comes together. And then what we then do is we basically iterate over that material. So we are now using that material for almost a year, and we always gather feedback, and then based on that feedback, we fine-tune all the slides and the exercises to make it better for the next workshop. But it's not as much energy and time that we have to spend on it like we did the very first time when we created that material.
I would totally agree that having your attendees build an application is a terrific way for people to learn the framework, because like they get into testing, they get into routing, like they get into translation, like everything. Like you can touch on anything by building an application, and it gives them like a specific problem that they need to go in and solve. Whereas on the video side of things, I think that it's really effective to just focus on one thing. That's why I love the way that Egghead does things. It's just, focus on the one thing, teach about that concept, and then people can find that and like they find it because they're looking to figure out, well, okay, so how does a watch work? How do you do scoped out watch, or how do you use ng repeat? And they can learn about that and then move on and like continue on. It's like a Stack Overflow answer, like on steroids. Yeah, and then you can piece these things together in a series and make it a lot more cohesive. So if somebody can't make it to a workshop or something, they can go through a series and see like how all these pieces work together.
I think that I would add that everything you want to teach, whether it's a video or a workshop or a blog post or anything, comes down to three things. First is the three things are context, problem, and solution. So context is given the background, like what is the context of this problem? Like if it's building an app, okay, so maybe give a background about maybe the browser or how the browser, like give like the basic story, not getting too deep, okay, not to confuse people, and then like display like or explain the problem. What is the problem? What we want to do, and what gets in our way, and then we explore the solution, how it solves the problem. I think these are, for me, this is the formula for me to explain stuff about the front-end development or software development in general. And reading like Pascal's blog posts, which I very, very, very appreciate, he does a really, really great job at explaining the context, the problem, and the solution very well. And in terms of the difference between video and a live workshop, I think that so in the video, I also try to keep it in like a few minutes time span, which makes it very, very hard, because the shorter the video, the harder the planning and the constructing of the video, and how do you reduce the context, how do you reduce the problem into something very specific, and how do you explain the solution under 5 minutes. Like, how do you do this kind of stuff? It make it very hard, but again, you realize that you can save a lot of words in teaching those stuff. You can go straight into the point of what is the context, problem, and solution very quickly, and then it translates to maybe the workshops. Later, I can explain people, students and stuff, really quickly, like the problem, and then you zoom out. Like, okay, you start maybe with a small problem and you zoom out, or you explain a bigger problem and you zoom in to different parts, and then you can divide your workshop that way. Maybe this is how you guys told. You explained about the models you built. Maybe this is like a zoom in of the bigger problem, which is okay, how do you develop an app? Okay, or how do you develop an app in Angular or whatever? How do you do front-end development? So I think it comes down to those three parts.
You know, the footprint of teaching is difficult. I think we could all agree on that, in terms of trying to teach someone the entire chain that is currently front-end development, or any development for that matter. And one of those things that we often have to teach is testing. Excuse me. And testing is hard. It's such a hard thing. How do you teach testing to newcomers to a framework, and how do you keep them from not leaving your class? Because testing can be problematic for some. It kind of turns people off in some cases. How do you get around that?
So in Angular, testing is actually super easy, so no one leaves our class. They run into our room and they want to learn it. So if you do Angular, that's not your problem at all. That's my 2 cents.
I would still say that there's actually quite a bit of magic that you need to learn about testing with Angular. Like, you have to learn about the before each module, bootstrapping your module, and you have to learn about if you need to have access to any services, you need to learn about the inject in the before each. And so there's certainly boilerplate, and there are libraries that kind of help remove that boilerplate and make it a lot more approachable. So testing is, I would say that it's easier in Angular just because of the way that the framework's created, or the way the framework works with dependency injection and isolated components as directives. And so like that makes it a lot more easy to test than, say, like something in the jQuery days where you're depending on a ton of global state stuff. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff that you have to learn, and like, especially newcomers, when you get started, you have to just kind of accept this is the way that things work. And then after a while, you kind of figure out like how things work. And one thing that I've noticed people make the mistake early on is you hear all like the different opinions on whether you should have multiple modules in an application or a single module. And if you go the multiple modules route, which has, like, there are reasons to go with multiple modules, then you wind up realizing that your dependencies are all messed up, and this directive is using a service that isn't part of its module, and so you need to bootstrap that module as well, and so things kind of get a little bit hairy with that, and you really just have to understand how like some of the internals of Angular. Otherwise, you'll kind of get yourself caught up a little bit in some of these abstractions that Angular has for you.
So I like to. I want to agree with. Sorry, Chris.
That's fine.
You did it to me. I will do it to you. So Justin said that testing is hard, and I agree. Depending on how from which angle you look at it, because if we talk about the context, like I said before, for a second, and we think of it through the eyes of someone who never tested his code or her code before, it's if we put ourselves in their place for a second, there usually is a lack of motivation to even learn it. It starts from the motivation in the beginning to learn testing, and once you get that sorted out, people want to maybe more invest in it, and the learning curve for the beginning is stiff. Angular is in fact the easiest, like from my experience, I heard also React is also good in that area, but Angular compared to a lot of other frameworks is one of the easiest frameworks to test our coding, which make it easier than other frameworks, but it doesn't make it like an easy because you need to swap. I have actually in one of my workshops out of that I just opened up a GitHub project called Angular Spies, just as a caveat. Just if someone want to check it out, I will put the link, which make it even a bit easier to start, because you just use a very like 3 lines API and you have all of your dependency spied out or mocked out. But that's just the side point. But getting back to the motivation. So I think that it comes down, what I try to, when I teach about testing, I try to get the context right, which is why testing our code. Why is it important? What is the problem it solves? And I think for me, it does 2 things. First, and I think the least important, which is catching logic errors. The first time you see, like, you change your code and you see like, I don't know, 50 tests fail, and you realize that, oh, it fails on my computer and not in production, okay, which give me time to save face and not push like bad code into the Git repository. It's magic, okay? It's like whoa, where was it like before? But the more important thing, which is the second thing, is it gives you a very like strict way to write better structures, like better code structures and better code. Like you must, if you write tests, you pretty much must write it in such a way that it's more maintainable, easier to understand, and your test becomes the spec, or which are the spec, but it becomes the actual documentation. And this is, I think, the best motivation that I found to write tests, because it makes me write modular code which is more maintainable. But for that, like, beginners need to understand why modular code is better and to understand the context and the problem. And we go back and zoom in and stuff like that. But I think these are the 2 main parts that I like to teach in the beginning, and then teach them the how. And And every team that I ever taught testing, like in enterprise companies, like they're all excited and it lasts for 1 week. And after 1 week, I come and I ask, okay, show me your tests. And everyone like, yeah, there was like an urgent bug fix and I couldn't really get to it. And basically what they're saying is that I pretty much forgot all of the syntax and I didn't want to look because I got this bug fix to fix and this bug to fix and I didn't have time, and it's like psychological. So I found out that if you want to implement it in your work or in your like development, you need to repeat it, and start with one thing small and like add more stuff to it, because if you do it one time, it won't last. That's me.
So I totally agree with what you said, and I think we all agree that like testing is super important and all this. However, what we decided for our workshop is when we teach people Angular, and like especially people who haven't done anything with Angular yet, we don't have them solve all the exercises in a TDD way, because it's just too much of a hassle for them, like to learn testing Angular code beside learning the all the other stuff, like how do controllers work, how do directives work, and services and all this. So what we do is we make testing a dedicated session in our workshop where we go through all this, like how do I test services, how do I test directives, and all this. I think, like, and I'm not saying this is a hard fact. It may just be a weakness on our side, but what we just figured out for us is that it will eat up too much time and be a too big of a burden if we try to force people solve all the exercise in a TDD way up front. So that's just how we approach that in our workshop.
I agree.
So we are.
So I would actually. Sorry, just 1 second. I would say, in addition to all the other stuff that's been said, I think the real hang up for people is just getting it set up. So like once you get it set up, then like it's so much easier. Like if you think about, you have two different scenarios. You have one scenario where you're developing your code, you go to the browser, you hit refresh, you lose all of your state, and you have to start all over, like click all the buttons and everything. Oh shoot, it didn't work, runtime error, whatever. Go back to your code, you fix it again, you do a refresh. Like it takes a lot of time to develop a feature that way, and that's just the way that we're used to. And ultimately, you should be doing that before you actually commit the code. I would generally like recommend, but you don't have to do that every single time you make a change to the code. If you first set up the tests, and so that like it's easy to add tests, and then when you start fixing a bug or you're starting to develop a feature, if you've already got all that framework set up, then you just add your test for the thing that you're developing, and you start developing the thing, and boom, like this is basic TDD, test-driven development like concepts, but it's so valuable. And then at the end of your development stuff, you go and you manually test it just to make sure that you're like not crazy, and everything integrates well together. And then you commit that, and what you're committing includes tests, and so like people won't break it in the future, or it's less likely to be broken in the future. So yeah, like test. It's such like it is so valuable. But the real challenge, I think, is people getting the testing framework set up and making it easy to write a test. If it's not easy to write a test, then people aren't going to do it.
Yeah, and if anybody's intimidated by testing, like you said, just getting it set up, there are a ton of generators out there that will do a lot of that for you. So like of 700 Angular Yeoman generators that are out there now, one of which I wrote, one of the little small ones, generating Angular Blueprint, very nice. You should go look at it. But one of the big things is like, okay, so you generate your view. So here's your controller, here's your view, and then it generates the test scaffolding for you with a test that passes. And I think that's a big thing too, is that once you see it and it passes, what you have to try to do then is not break it. And so rather than starting from the ground up, you have this little shell that you can start to work with, rather than feeling like, okay, I have to start doing all of this from scratch. What is the before each syntax again? all that kind of stuff. So if anybody is intimidated by that, I would look into some of those until you are really comfortable with the syntax, and then you'll just fly through it. We are starting to run out of time. If everybody has a few more minutes, the one other thing that we wanted to talk to touch on is one of the other mediums for learning and teaching, which is blog posts. So we've talked about videos, we've talked about in-person. I know I really read a lot of blog posts. I imagine most developers that are do this as for their job, as a hobby, whatever it is, you tend to read a lot. So where do you guys want to really get into this? Like, what does it take? One, what do you look for in a good blog post when you are trying to learn something, and how do you approach when you want to write a blog post about a given topic?
I'm going to hand the mic over to ThoughtRam, so take it away.
I was actually waiting for you, Ken, to start because you wrote a couple of awesome blog posts recently. But sure, I can make the start. So when Christoph and I write blog posts or articles, so what we do, or maybe it's a bit different for Christoph, but I can say what I do. So our latest articles are mainly about Angular 2, and we want to learn about Angular 2. And so we still, I mean, when you want to teach something, you have to learn it first, right? So, and we also have to learn. So what we do is we take the source code, we try out some features, we read the source code, we experiment with it, and then most of the time we want to just take a single topic that we're interested in, that we want to learn, and then we just start exploring it. We play with it and everything. And then during that process of trying that out and see how things go, and looking, of course, at existing tests, because everything is tested, and it helps a lot to actually understand that code. It's actually currently the best way to understand the framework, in my opinion. We basically, or what I do is, you get some questions during that process because some things don't work the way you expect, or there are just some things unclear. What I then do is I try to get answers to these questions, because I'm sure that others will run into these questions as well. And then I try to answer those to myself, and then I explore further and further until there's, for this particular part of this topic, nothing to explore anymore. And then what I do is I basically just write that down. I don't take this process as I experience it and write it down in that way. I try to write it down in a kind of, as Shai also mentioned, in a kind of problem-based or problem-oriented manner, so that you introduce a certain feature, and then the one who's reading your article is probably wondering, okay, so what is this feature all about? Why do I need it actually? What's the actual problem that it's solving? So you always have to start with a problem, and that's what I do in those articles. I start to explain a problem, and then so that everyone understands what we're actually talking about and why we need a solution for something, and then I introduce the solution for it. And that's basically the process, how I personally approach this.
Yep. I used to have a blog. And then I switched domains, and I didn't have the mental strength to deal with WordPress again. And so I stopped blogging, but I will have another blog, okay? And I will write there. I actually started with a blog. Actually, all of my present lecture giving and workshops and all that started from one blog post, which was, hey, I saw this cool video, you should check it out, and it's not like one-liner or something like that. It was just a blog I thought 3 people will read, and it was a mental notes for me, for myself, to re-watch videos, like a bookmark place or stuff I read, and it slowly started being hey, I solved this I solved this bad problem using this solution, and then it became like blog posts describing like a bigger problems, and actually people started commenting, and it was really surprising because I thought like my mom and my sister read like these posts and nobody else, but suddenly someone from like, I don't know, Thailand wrote me. And yeah, so I just said it as an encouragement for all of you listeners. If you think you are not like too experienced to start a blog, you don't need to be. And what Pascal said, which is one of the greatest truth of all, is teaching is like when you teach, you learn the best. So align yourself into this teaching mentality and start a blog and start blogging, even if you are not sure like you have something to blog about. Just share your enthusiasm for learning like what is a closure in JavaScript, or what is like something very, very basic for other people. Most of the people, it won't be basic for them. So you will teach someone in the world and you will learn it better yourself. And then we will all become a better developer community. Can I get a for everyone?
Amen.
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 I'll just add, if you're wanting to blog and you're looking for a good platform, medium.com is a fantastic place. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of the idea of like, oh, what about my personal brand and whatever, but like, just kind of get over that. It's so nice to not have to manage a WordPress blog anymore. And so the other nice thing is it's extremely social, and so you can get like followers, and they did kind of mess up comments. It's really stupid the way they do that now, but for the most part, it's a fantastic platform. And so yeah, I highly recommend Medium. I blog on there, and I generally I have several blog posts about Angular, and just like some concepts, or like some places where I got tripped up, like how to manage your watchers in Angular application as it grows, and how to load scripts onto the page, and how to I like some random experiments that I've tried, and then also like I've been doing a lot more general like open source blog posts, and general JavaScript blog posts, and so it's just a really good place to contribute to the community. Using written medium, because like we all learn differently. Some people learn from videos better than they do blog posts, and vice versa. And so providing those different ways to consume stuff, I think, is a good thing. So recommend blogging as a good medium to communicate that stuff.
Kent, your blog posts are awesome, but don't never become a car salesman, because the way you like try to sell like Medium, okay, it's really a cool platform, but their comments suck, and you know, I was about to open up an account, and then I like okay, close the tab. You know, this is a Ferrari, but it has a really bad air condition, so don't take it, you know. And but yeah, your blog posts.
All right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I'm a fan of all of you guys. You all put out a lot of good stuff, and so I can make sentences. I promise, full cohesive sentences that I can talk into the microphone. I can do it. It just takes a little bit of time. You can see the little smoke coming out of my ears. All right,
you go, Dan.
but that is about all the time we have for today. So. We just go back around the room really quick, remind everybody who you are, how they can get in touch with you. If you have any open source projects that you're looking for contributors, if there's anything you want to plug, go at it.
I'll go first.
Okay, so I'm just going to. Oh, sorry. So let me just start here.
He does it again.
Yeah, I always do.
Go for it.
So yeah, as a reminder, I'm Christoph. So if you want to get in touch with me, just write me at Christoph@thoughtram.io, and yeah, ask me whatever you like. And maybe I mean, this is not entirely only focused on Angular. So also a little spoiler, if you like to learn something new, maybe you want to try Rust. And also if you have questions regarding Rust, you can also get in touch with me. And yeah, other than that, I would say keep learning. If you get stuck, there's so much like material in forms of videos, bloggings, workshops, whatever. Keep learning, and yeah, future's gonna be great.
Pascal?
I agree.
All right, how can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me by I think following me on Twitter is one of the best ways. Actually, it's just my name, Pascal Precht, and
God bless you.
Thanks. They should also try to follow Shai on Twitter. That's maybe also a way to get into contact with me because he's my. No one knows. No one knows. But Shai is actually my personal social media manager. So whenever he does weird jokes or if he photobombs your selfies at Angular conferences, is actually he's doing that for me. So yeah, I think that's the best way to get in touch.
Yeah. So direct all of your hate mail to Shai Reznik at pascalmediaobligation.com. Okay.
All right, Shai. How can people get in touch with you? You specifically, not Pascal.
I love when people are getting in touch with me. You can ask Pascal. But
don't introduce the code of contact, please.
Code of contact. Yeah, we had that thing in Angular Connect, but it's for another episode. So people can again follow on Twitter. I have 2 Twitter accounts, one for HighRes and one for my personal life when I put picture of cats and my baby and stuff like that, if you're interested in those kind of stuff. And once HighRes will be uploaded, I will put there the email. You can email me and send hate mail for Pascal, and I will forward it to him. He pays me for that. I don't know why, but he does. That's I think about it. I have a GitHub account which I will post the Angular Spies. If anyone want to check it out, you're welcome. And I think.
And Kent?
HighRes.io. Okay, so for me, you can find me pretty much anywhere at Kent C. Dodds. That's Dodds. And let's see, there was something. Oh, yeah. So another thing, if you have any questions for me, I have an Ask Me Anything. You just ama.kentcdodds.com, and that'll take you to a GitHub repo where you can ask me questions. And then also, I've been getting into React lately, and so if you're curious about React, you can definitely ask me about that. React is awesome, as is Angular and Ember and Backbone and JavaScript. So I also, like I said, I started Angular Air, but I actually recently stepped down from Angular Air to start JavaScript Air. I just don't have enough time to do everything, so handed off Angular Air to some awesome developers, and I'm doing JavaScript Air. Our first episode is next week with Brendan Ike on next Wednesday. It's a live show.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's a good first episode.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's super exciting. We have an awesome panel. Kyle Simpson, Dan Abramoff, Lynn Clark. Just solid panel. So I'm really looking forward to this podcast. And it's a live broadcast podcast. So tune in next week. It's JavaScript Air. That's it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys very, very much again. As always, this is the Web Platform Podcast. I'm Danny Blue.
I'm Justin Roberto.
And we will talk to everybody next week.
Call for proposals is done and registration is open. And O'Reilly Fluent Conf is back in just a few months. Fluent the Web Platform Conference will be held in San Francisco, California on March 7th through 10th, 2016. So get practical training in JavaScript, HTML5, CSS, and the latest web development technologies and frameworks. The Web Platform Podcast listeners receive a 20% discount when registering for the conference. So make sure you use the promotional code PCWPP20 to receive your discount. You want to learn more about what's coming on next on the Web Platform Podcast? Follow us on Twitter at the Web Platform, or on Google Plus and YouTube at the Web Platform. We also need your help in creating transcripts of the episodes and helping to create open source projects under our GitHub organization. Contact Eric Isaacson at eIsaacson
or Danny Blue at D_Blue. That's DEE_BLOO.
Thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you all next week.